Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Seth Melamed. I'm the CEO of FTX Japan, and I'm joined by Stani Kulechov, who is the founder CEO of Aave. Hello, Stani.
Hey, Seth, how are you?
Doing great. I'm really excited for this session. Just a little background. And I was in traditional finance before that. And ahead of this session, I got a chance to learn about what Aave is doing, and I'm really excited and really impressed by what you guys have built over the past few years. So with that, could you, I think there's a lot of people maybe who don't know the scope of the services that Aave is providing. Could you give a little bit of background as a starting point?
Yeah, sure. So Aave is a company that builds technology. So we're a full stack Web3 company, and we build protocols and applications. And one of the protocols we built that is our flagship is the Aave protocol. And the Aave protocol is simply a set of smart contracts on Ethereum and multiple other networks deployed, where you can supply cryptographic assets into the protocol and earn yield, and at the same time use those assets as a collateral to draw liquidity to fund other finance goals that can be in the DeFi space, or by converting the funds into real assets and paying for tuition, mortgage, or any other finance goal. We currently in the protocol, it's accruing roughly from 5 to 15 billion worth of value, depending on the market fluctuations of those collateral values. And we have the version 3 out now at the moment, so it's the latest upgrade that has been running for the past months on mainnet. The protocol itself is governed by the Aave community itself, so the token holders come together and vote what kind of decisions they want to do, and typically changing risk parameters, registering new assets into the protocol. So the Aave team can't go and arbitrarily change the code itself, and that's the idea of decentralization and decentralized finance.
That's great. So I think I wanted to jump to sort of a very current topic about what's been going on in the industry for the past couple of months, where we've had a lot of issues with basically uncollateralized lending and centralized lenders taking users' assets and potentially rehypothecating those assets to borrowers, but not necessarily being fully collateralized. What are some of your thoughts as someone who's built a fully decentralized platform that's replaced human judgment with smart contracts? When you look at what's happened at some of those big lenders, and we won't name names for their sake, but as someone who's like really built a DeFi infrastructure, what are your thoughts about what we've seen in some of those big liquidity and bankruptcy issues the past couple months?
Yeah, I've seen kind of like the evolvement of undercollateralized lending quite early. So with the Aave protocol, we started already building our first version, kind of like a POC a few years ago, and we built completely on smart contracts with the transparency in mind. So at the same time, I saw how many of these centralized lending platforms were evolving at the same time. Obviously, with a big loan balance sheets that didn't exist to the scale that, for example, DeFi had a couple of years back. Now, for me, building something what could be centralized, there is like a few problems that I see. I feel that the biggest issue regarding to like undercollateralized loans aren't really an issue. The issue is that the lack of transparency and excessive risk taking. And I think what we solve in decentralized finance is that you have this wide amount of transparency, not just only on one particular protocol, but the whole ecosystem. So we can quantify, for example, how much exposure of a particular stablecoin there is across all the DeFi protocols, how the funds are moving, and who are the market participants who are actually holding those funds. And I think this allows us to understand a bit more the markets, but it also helps us to quantify the risk we have in the whole system, a systemic risk, and then reflect different kinds of risk parameters towards those risks that we might have. And in centralized platforms and the underclass lending, the challenge is that you don't really see that exposure pretty much at all. So the companies are pretty much like black boxes that are lending and borrowing. Mm-hmm. And crypto lending itself and lending against a volatile collateral in crypto is a relatively new field. It's a few years mm-hmm. old. So mm-hmm. I kind of see that you want to have that transparency in the right. space.
Right. Well, certainly Luna is a good example in UST where the collateral backing the coin was very volatile. And so is your view, though, that going back to the centralized lenders, that the problem wasn't that they weren't sufficiently collateralized, or was it the issue that the collateral they were taking was volatile in nature? Like, what do you think was, if there was one thing that the biggest mistake they made, where do you think it was?
I think it's excessive risk and excessive leverage. So what happened for the past couple of months is that in the space, most of the leverage has been wiped out, and that has essentially wiped out also these companies. And they were simply taking too excessive risk on their positions, right. And then they had their margin calls and calls on their loans, and that led to a situation where these entities became insolvent. So I think that is the issue. But with the transparency, what's fascinating is that actually you could have seen the amount of risk that these entities would have been taken, and we can actually, as a community, question, for example, is the amount of risk that or the loan balances and collaterals in line with what could be a typical lending relationship. And when you look more into the strategies, it seemed to be that these companies were trying to take loans from wherever they could to get their exposure. So I think that's kind of challenging part, but also what I see in DeFi as well, and for example with the case with Luna and UST, is that even when you have this transparency, you still need to battle test your ideas, your economical models, and then also the tech itself, the protocol. So many of the things that we have seen for the past 2 months are more experimentations, and I think, for example, in Luna's case, the model simply didn't work on those market conditions, and I will not call the stablecoin that they had a stablecoin until something like that can be proven on a period of time and different market conditions. So also that's kind of the thing. You have this transparency, but then you have low barrier to enter and innovate, which is good for innovation, but also we need to be mindful that whatever we're using in decentralized finance, we need to do a lot of research and understand which of these protocols are financial sound.
Sure. So I'd like to come back to algorithmic stablecoins a little bit later, because I know we saw the announcement about the Aave stablecoin that's coming. But the last question in terms of sort of comparison of CeFi, this is DeFi, that I wanted to touch upon was, in every sometimes when there's a bear market someplace, there's a bull market someplace else. And we know that during this pullback, even the DeFi protocols, the TVL, the market cap of the DeFi ecosystems is way down. But if we were to step back and think about it, does in some sense the fact that Aave was able to weather through this volatility versus some centralized lenders that weren't, is this maybe potentially in the long run a real signal that DeFi is more robust, more transparent, and a better way for people to deploy on-chain assets?
Yeah, I think the fact that the community is setting different risk parameters is a big benefit, because you have more eyes actually looking on the risk side. So I definitely think it has its own advantage as well. So it really brings a lot of benefits to that. But also I think when we look at decentralized systems, the smart contracts really work in a way where whatever is codified, that will happen. So for example, when we look at the different lenders, well, let's say we look at the different protocols and different lenders, most where actually the exposure was repaid was in decentralized protocols, because they enforce the rules more efficiently than the paper agreements. And I think that's something that works in the benefit, but also it boils down back to the idea of transparency as well. When we see the market's better, we can actually act. And because the liquidation networks are also permissionless, it means that anyone can come and actually compete on liquidating positions. So when the market conditions change rapidly, you also have a wide ecosystem where these liquidators, they might take flash loans from other protocols and liquidate the positions. So I think like the power is in the community, and the power is in ability to lowering the threshold to participate to keep the market solvent.
Got it. That's great. Okay, so I want to switch gears a little bit. I remember the announcement about ARK and your collaboration with Fireblocks and creating a sort of a pathway for institutional investors to get involved in DeFi. How has that been going? Directionally, are you seeing what kind of uptake and what kind of counterparts have been sort of the early adopters of ARK?
ARK is an interesting market because it works differently than the main Aave markets, in the sense that you have so-called whitelister functionality, which allows to whitelist borrowers, depositors, and liquidators. And those whitelisters can be different kinds of entities. Fireblocks is one of them. There's a Swiss Figma regulated bank, CeFi, also becoming a whitelister. And the Aave governance is essentially voting in different risk parameters and adding those whitelisters. So and a whitelist, the idea there is that you could actually create certain kind of prerequisite requirements to enter the markets. And I think what we have seen is that the Aave ARK has been a more of a kind of like a sandbox for these institutional entities to come and try out decentralized finance, test out their smart contract infrastructure, use smart contracts as well, and in a way where they have certain requirements like KYC, where the counterparties are known. And I think that's a way of actually just creating exposure for the more institutional markets, and it's been very helpful for actually getting kind of like a DeFi on a larger largely exposed in
Sure.
the institutional side.
Sure. And just for my own understanding, so you know that all of the participants, whether the lenders, the borrowers, or the entities, but within that pool, do you actually know the identity of a specific participant, or does it remain anonymous when someone is a counterpart to a transaction in ARC?
Yeah. So the whitelisters, they know the participants, but other than that, they aren't known for the other peers at the current state. You can add additional. I mean, the kind of like a prerequisite rules that are outside of the smart contracts, the kind of like an off-chain processes. Those you can change together with all the whitelisters. So that's something that can be done, but I haven't seen a proposal like that yet.
Sure. Okay, so I want to switch gears, going to a little bit on the technical side. So I know that you guys started off on Ethereum. I think your name was even Ethereum related, and you stayed true to basically protocols that are EVM compatible. Have you thought about building support for other chains and non-EVM compatible blockchains?
Yeah. So Aave has kind of like the important raised in Ethereum. That's where the EVM was first started, and that's what we started to build there. But we're very inclusive in terms of how we, as a community, see other networks and deploy markets. And I've seen the community being deployed. The community has deployed the Aave markets in Polygon, Avalanche, and Layer 2s. And I think Layer 2s has a lot of potential. In non-EVM aspects, I would say that will be also fascinating experimentation. We have something similar going with Starkware on Starknet, but we are also super excited about the idea of being able to deploy somewhere in a non-EVM environment. The challenge for us is that in that case, we have to rewrite quite a lot of the
Right.
Code base. So it will not be as straightforward as it is. And on top of that, we would have to, of course, do security audits and pretty much the similar process as we are doing in the EVM space. But that would be an experiment I would love to see to evolve.
Sure. So, Stani, you're the founder also of Lens Protocol, which is a decentralized social graph that allows developers to build Web3 social media applications. What sort of inspired you to develop social media that on blockchain? What gaps did you see of what's out there that kind of got you interested in developing Lens?
Yeah, I think we have quite well built DeFi ecosystem at the moment, and we've seen a lot of activity in the NFT space in terms of empowering the creators to access their communities directly. And one of the things that we've seen as a kind of like a missing part is that you really don't have ownership of your social graph in the current Web2 environment. So we wanted to create a protocol where you could actually create a on-chain profile, which is tokenized as an NFT, and then you can follow other profiles, which are also follow NFTs, and create your social graph on chain. Meaning that, for example, if you are if you don't like a particular social media application and you want to leave that application, you don't lose your followers. And also, when you post content, you have that direct. Your followers can see your publication directly in a censorship-resistant fashion. So I think it's a very valuable infrastructure for like the wider Web3 space, and very useful kind of like a bringing the ownership of your social graph to yourself.
Right. Of course, the other side of that coin is, I mean, being censorship resistant is great. It's, you know, one of the original drivers that got me interested into Bitcoin, for example. But in speech matters, it could be a two-edged sword as well, right? So how would you see that evolving in terms of distasteful or hateful speech, and how would that sort of be played out in a lens type of platform?
Yeah, so it's actually quite fascinating because on the protocol level, it's quite agnostic what you can do. So, but essentially, it's more up to the middle layer, the data indexers to decide what they are showing to the end users, and end of the day, the applications itself. So the applications are more of that are built on top of the Lens protocol are more of user experiences, but they're also a way of curating the content. So you'll probably see from the indexing, the middleware layer, content moderation provided by different service providers to these applications. But also the application itself might have their own algorithms, or they might use their community for that aspect too, similar to what, for example, Reddit is doing today as well. And I think that's how you kind of can curate essentially the valuable content. But the idea is that as a user, you have more flexibility and freedom, because today, for example, when we are using Twitter, we're essentially stuck in the platform. So we're stuck in the algorithms they build and choose, their terms and conditions, and their user experiences. But with Lens protocol and the applications built on top, if I necessarily don't align with an application that has been built, I can actually go and use another application instead. So the applications and the algorithms are kind of like a competing, providing you a better experience.
That's really interesting. That's great. Thank you, Stani. I know we're kind of running a little bit of short on time, and we would be remiss to not discuss the recent, I think it was fairly recently you announced about the development of the Aave stablecoin, the GHO or Ghost, right? So
Go, yeah.
Go. Okay, sorry, Go. That's a good one. So when I was doing listings, one of the first questions I asked is, well, why do we need this coin? So why do we need Go? We've got a lot of stable coins out there. Yeah, what is the underlying rationale for this?
Yeah, so Go stablecoin essentially is over collateralized stablecoin, which is essentially you can mint Go by supplying assets into the Aave protocol as a user, and then you can mint Go. And currently, there's definitely other over collateral stablecoins, but the challenge, for example, is that usually when you supply your asset into stablecoin protocols, you don't earn yield on your collateral itself. So the Go stablecoin is a bit more innovative in that sense. So you can, when you supply assets into the Aave protocol, you can actually earn yield on your collaterals there, and you can use your whole portfolio at the same time to get the borrowing power to mint Go stablecoin. So what we see here is that it's a bit more innovative and competitive way of creating stable value on chain. But at the same time, the other stablecoins, they are not, of course, disappearing from the Aave markets, and I think they are. It's quite important that the Aave markets are very diverse in that sense, and we believe that most of the stablecoin activity will anyways happen on layer 2s, and we'll see a lot of interesting maybe new payment applications being built on Go, and we will love to see more kind of like an organic adoption into payments as well, and I kind of like from the growth perspective.
Sure. And is there any when you went into the design of Go, are there lessons learned? And for instance, if you were being obviously there's a lot after UST, there's obviously going to be a lot of scrutiny about especially algorithmic stablecoins, even fiat-backed stablecoins in terms of attestation and audits. But I think there'll be a lot of more scrutiny going forward around the algorithmic stablecoin. So just maybe, I know we have much time left, but how are we dealing with Go in terms of stability and ensuring that it maintains its peg, even in, as you mentioned, all weather type of conditions?
Yeah, I mean, the Go stablecoin model is proven in the sense that it's over-collateralized model. So the network will always keep the collateralization with the liquidators that are already liquidating positions in the Aave markets. So essentially, on top of that, there's so-called E-mode in the Aave protocol version 3, where you can actually borrow on a 98% loan to value another stable coin. So if there is the underpeg or depeg, you could actually use that arbitrage opportunity through the Aave protocol itself. So we kind of see it as a similar as the so-called PSM module that's, for example, MakerDAO's system has. Got it.
Great. Okay, well, I think we're running out of time. Stani, thank you so much today. I hope it was useful for the audience. I certainly learned a lot. And I guess hopefully we'll be seeing you in Asia later on in Singapore at Token 2049. So hopefully we can meet in person next time.
Thank you so much, Seth. Was amazing.
Thank you, Stani.
Thank you.